Hello and welcome to The Winning Story, your one-stop platform for credible sports news and inspiring tales. Today we have with us somebody who's had a lot of firsts. He's India's first real road racer, India's first guy to compete at the IRRC, and in the future one of the most or the first Indian athletes to be a prominent figure in this category. So I would like to welcome Rishabh Shah on The Winning Story.
What's up, guys? Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, Rishabh, before we get into the technicalities of the sport, I would like to go back in time, like take you on a trip down memory lane and understand your sports journey. We all know that you were first initially an athlete and then you jumped into racing. But how did your sports journey start?
Initially, I was actually playing rugby. So I played a decent amount of rugby into school level and also with the club PRFC and Bangalore Bombers. And we played a bit of rugby. And then from rugby, I switched to golf. And in golf, I was fourth in South India, I think in 2008.
Yeah.
I played a bit of golf, but I felt that was like really slow, and even though I was good at it, I think I burnt out because I was playing so much. And then I switched to athletics because I was very athletic, and it was kind of late. It was in my high school that I switched to athletics. And athletics, I stuck to athletics for a good 5 years.
Yeah.
Found some really good progress. I was the best athlete of Karnataka in one of the state meets. Represented the state in a couple of nationals. I think I have 2 or 3 national medals with the state, both senior and junior.
You were also named the national champion, like the national gold medalist of I think 2016.
Yeah, I guess I don't recollect on the top of my head, but yeah, I was part of the relay team that won, I think in Mangalore. I think it placed, I don't remember, maybe second or third or first, I don't remember, but I was running at a very high level.
Yeah.
And the reason the switch came about was one of 2 things. One was because I felt as an athlete, if I'm not at the Olympics, having so much time and effort being put in would not make sense.
Correct.
And with a sport like sprinting, at a point where actually I was performing really well, I understood that there's a huge gap between the international times and the times that we were running. Your Olympic qualifying at that time was, I think, 10 flat.
Yeah.
And the national record is 10-2. Right now, I think it's 10-2 or 10-2.
It's come down to 10.1, but
Yeah. In athletics, every millisecond counts. To drop even point 1 or point 2 is a lot of work. It's not at all easy. And I just understood that to be at an Olympic level sprinter, it's going to be a very uphill task. So I looked at it realistically and knew when to pull the plug. And I had no hopes of getting into motorsport. Motorsport always piqued my interest because actually my dad's a national champion. He used to ride bikes and he used to navigate in the 4-wheeler rallies. And I always looked up to that and was always interested in motorsport, but it's something that he never encouraged because obviously of the initial investment needed to pursue motorsport. It is an expensive sport, and which is why I never was really encouraged into motorsport. But once I quit athletics, there was a selection for a Suzuki one-make championship at Miko Katopia here in Bangalore. And that was the most expensive 500 rupees I ever spent. But there's just been zeros in front of that ever since. So that's how it started. Really humble beginning, just me being passionate, trying to explore motorsport, not really having a real roadmap or an idea.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, things unveiled itself to me, and now here I am.
got it. So you just spoke about your father being an inspiration to you, that you looked up to him. Not to forget that you had mentioned he also raced for Yamaha at some point.
Yes, I mean, they are mainly looking at their sales and their marketing budgets and their numbers. And as an athlete, it's really hard to break into that. So, I mean, the industry, even though you have a hero and all these guys right now, having a team for the privateers and the guys who are up and coming, it's really difficult.
So what do you think that can change in terms of government support or probably the sponsors coming in, what exactly do you think is the need of the hour for road racing to be on the map?
First of all, I think road racing is a niche that not a lot of people understand or would support only because of the inherent risks that it carries. So the government supporting road racing is out of question. They would support track racing, and I hope they did, because it encourages road safety. So a lot of these kids who buy a bike, maybe an R15, maybe an RC390, they want to go fast, and that's what the bike is designed to do. You can't stop them. But what you can give them is a platform to do it safely. The road is not a place to speed. It's not a place to try new things. And that's where I feel if you have a more structured approach, maybe not supporting the sport directly, but facilitating a platform where kids can come in a safe environment, explore the bike, explore the things, and then take it from there. Because then you'll have a lot more responsible riders on the road, a lot more safer riders on the road, and on the back of that, then the sport grows because you have more people interested in the sport. And seeing that, you'll have more brands coming into the sport. So that's one aspect from the government. From the brand aspect, if they understood motorsport more, because there's one thing of being a content creator and there's another thing of representing country and actually putting down performances. And I think having raced abroad, I can tell you that brands have a clear and distinct difference between the budgets they spend on serious racing and serious performance and content creation. I think that line over here is very blurred. And yeah, I feel like the brands are also responsible to some aspect of helping athletes reach the next level, because a factory manufacturer is not going to support a nobody.
Yeah.
But till you get to a somebody, you need people to come together for pure passion and love of motorcycling, which I feel is slightly lacking now. Only business, which is okay, which is good. But the difference between guys in Europe and in the States is that they have a budget for promoting passion and promoting motorcycling, which is again, which ties back into their sales. So the brands align with real stories, real athletes, and that gets them real customers.
I want to do like a personal question for you. In India, we all know that cars and bikes are not just a vehicle, it's an emotion, right? And across the nation, it's always like once you pass your 10th standard, you'll either get a bike or a car, right? Growing up with so many sports and now getting into motorsport, which would you say was your first bike or your favorite bike?
So, like I told you, I was always a nutcase about motorcycles. I always loved motorcycles, and the first bike I could afford, and that's through saving pocket money and working a little bit, was an RX 100.
I think that's the most iconic bike of India.
Yeah, and it's only because I still remember I had sat behind a friend who at that time, there was a small mechanic a workshop, and he had a bike which was ported and which had a silencer in chamber, they call it, two-stroke chamber. And I sat behind that, and that was the first time I think I was afraid for my life. And I was like, damn, this is cool, I love this. And the two-stroke bikes, that's the characteristic, the power band hits so fast and it's in your face because there's no power, and then bam, there's all the power that there is.
The 1 second of throttle that comes
Exactly.
like blasts you off.
So yeah, that was the first bike I owned, and sadly I was collecting dust in my garage. But yeah, that's humble beginnings, small pleasures that get you hooked.
That is what we all look back to when we want to go ahead.
Exactly.
Like where you exactly started. So talking more on the first, in one of the interviews you mentioned that many racers call their first race as their worst race. Why is that? Because when it is your first race, you always, there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand, and people generally look at it as a learning curve. But is it different in road racing?
So to the audience and to yourself, to give you a background about road racing, this is the most purest form of motorsport there is in the world. There's a saying that the second production bike was built, it was taken out to race, and that's how road racing came about. So there were speed restrictions in the UK, which is why this little tiny island called the Isle of Man hosted a race called the Tourist Trophy way back in 1907. and it was run through public roads because they didn't have a speed limit. So that was the racetrack. And on the back of that, and the learnings from that, with countless number of people losing their lives, is the safety and the regulated tracks that we have today. with
More
the
like,
runoff.
so it's safe to say that Isle of Man is like the autobahn of
For sure.
bike riders.
To put it more factually, it's like free climbing.
Yeah.
So there is something called climbing with like assistance at a rope, and there's something called free climbing. So the Isle of Man is free climbing. You have no safety. There is no room for error. But it's expression at its finest. So to answer your question about the first, I feel it's more to do with the mentality. As an athlete, your first event, you feel nerves. You have like this expectation that you have on yourself. There's other people that have expectations of you. There's so much prep that you've gone through. There's so many untold hardships and struggles that you have to go through to get to the starting line. So, given all of that, sometimes it doesn't go out as planned or it doesn't go out as expected. But I feel that that's why most people say that okay, the first race is a race to forget. And I feel the more successful the athlete,
Yeah.
the most it's a feeling that I chase. I love the butterflies. I love learning a new circuit. I love being the underdog because we got to remember that I'm an Indian in a global sport. So just to be there and not finish last, to prove that okay, we can perform even the mid pack, and just to show them that okay, there is talent here as well. That's the biggest kick.
Got it. Circling back to one of your previous answers, you spoke about the Isle of Man, and if I am correct, there have been over 260 deaths since the event has started. So what is it about this track that though you are facing death, you still want to be there, you still want to win that race? What is it that makes it so special?
It's a feeling. It's like asking an alcoholic why do you drink. I mean, there's no real right answer to it.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, think about it this way.
Yeah.
Would an event like that be passed? No chance at all. They'd shoot it down. So the heritage, the history, you have bikes that were developed from that particular race. The company Honda,
Yeah.
a lot of the credibility was built upon winning those races. It's things that celebrate motorcycling, which makes it great. And it's just the feeling of cheating death. It's a fine line between perfection and disaster, and you're dancing right on the edge. So I think it's just the purity of the fact that people are not doing it just for the money or not doing it for the fame. They're doing it for proving themselves and bettering themselves, because it's not a mass start race. It's you against the clock, and everyone has their own little goals. The guy who comes first to the guy who comes last, everyone's respected the same. I mean, it's a crazy event, and the fact that you're allowed to do something like that in today's day and age is a celebration in itself, because everything is so bubble wrapped in safety that we forget how to live. And I feel that's the biggest takeaway from that. People do it because heck, you can.
I think it's you versus you there, more
Exactly.
than the clock or more than the fan or more than anything.
Exactly.
And while we are talking about one of the deadliest tracks, you said that road racing is a dangerous sport. Have you ever been in an accident that has made you question that why am I doing this?
I mean, I've had accidents, but I don't question it because I mean it's an occupational hazard. I have 2 dislocated shoulders. I've had a bunch of crashes. I mean, it's all part and parcel. But the only time I question my decision to go road racing is when a very famous racer, Luca Salvadori, he's from Italy,
Yeah.
very high-profile racer, passed away at my debut race in Froberg last year when I was debuting in my very first road race. And they spoke about them continuing the racing the next day. And even though I was taken aback, because he does have a YouTube channel and I followed it for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I was going to approach him after the day's racing to, just chat with him and tell him that, dude, I've been following you, I really like what you're doing, and hey, I'm from India, and you have left an impression. But sadly, that evening, he was no more. So it's that was surreal, because it's easy to talk about it and act cool, like, yeah, people die and I'm doing this, I'm so cool, but when you're in that situation, it is a very surreal feeling. And the next day when I was racing, you could still see the skid marks on the road where he had gone off. And in that time, for a split second, while I was on the bike, there was this lingering question in my head that, okay, these guys are professionals, getting paid to do it. You're self-funded, you're trying to rewrite, history and putting India on the map. Why on earth are you doing this? Like, it's quite stupid.
Yeah.
But when the visor drops, the bullshit stops. Get out there and I forget about it. It's chasing that feeling again, just apex after apex, going through the flow, trying to get faster, and everything just goes away. Like problems in your life, money, your job, whatever is that happening personally, everything just fades into it's just you and the motorcycle, and you're just in a weird space-time warp.
I can understand the kind of thrill and mind switch that is required during such moments. Talking about the financial part and everything that you just said about funding, I would say that there is a Riti Rivaj in Indian households that the first paycheck always goes back home. Do you remember what you did with your first paycheck?
First paycheck. To be honest, I had to save every penny because racing was expensive.
Yeah.
And insight, I worked for 4 years in a sport management firm, and honestly, whatever money I earned, everything went into racing. I had zero savings at the end of it. I mean, in the middle, when I did have good months where I was incentivized, I could afford to buy my mom a very nice pearl earring set for a 50th birthday.
That is very sweet.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get back to the people who support your
100%.
craziness. So there have been instances where I have been privileged enough to be able to share some special moments with my close dear ones.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I have no savings, man. Everything went into motorcycle, everything went into racing, all for this figment of imagination that I have of putting India on the map. So and I have no regrets. I mean, you have money to spend, so I can take these risks when I'm young. Maybe not so much after a couple of years.
So before we wrap up this interview, we actually have a special segment called as the winning story segment. This is where we look out for a story, incident, a moment, could be anything, and it need not be about winning. It is about you, your journey, your personality, how it helped you to be who you are today. So could you tell us anything that comes to your mind?
I have a couple of stories, but the one that strikes out the most is in UAE, when I was neck and neck with another championship contender. We sadly had a collision and we both crashed. He crashed quite badly. He, I think, broke his collarbone, and I got taken out as well, and I popped my shoulder. But at that point I was quite used to it because I popped my shoulder and I popped back in. It would hurt, but...
So you had like a Rohit Sharma moment.
Exactly. So, and it was quite painful, but at the same time, I didn't want to finish the last race, sealing the championship, but not being part of the grid, So I still remember that I had an ice pack, I taped it up. We had to go to the medical center, and they made me do a couple of exercises where internally I was screaming, but on the outside I had to show that, oh no, it's fine, like, there's nothing happening. Because it's quite strict, the safety regulation, because otherwise if you lose control of a bike that's doing 250 kilometers an hour, it's not a good story for anybody to stop. I was really happy that I could overcome that. I had to grit my teeth and finish the race. I mean, I did finish on the podium. That was the story of overcoming an obstacle. Other than that, I think it's the recent one in Germany, because it's my first road race. Super excited, super thrilled, super dangerous, because these are public roads, these are highways that you're going through. There's a particular corner where you're coming downhill at 200 kilometers an hour, you brake to second gear. It's a 90-degree left, and at the edge of it is a wall, so you're not even half a foot away from the wall. So you just duck in, and then you have to like do a slight shimmy to avoid hitting the wall, and then continue on your course. There's so many things that I had to acknowledge. Fear is one, and I mean, I think that's the most macho thing a person can do is accept that there was an aspect where they felt that they were inadequate or they had fear in them. But flip that switch and say that, you know what, I back my training, I back what I've learned over the years, and I'm going to implement them like how I implement it every single day at training and overcome this. And that's what I did. And even though someone died, and it was quite a dark weekend, but I was really happy that I was able to, you know, come out with a certain maturity and a different appreciation to that sport. The fact that I was able to do that, I mean, it reinforced my belief of being there and pursuing this, because I feel if it was anyone else in my situation, the results would be quite different, because the magnitude of that situation was quite intense.
That's just like Mamba with
Exactly. You zone in, you do what you got to do, you get the job done, and then all the emotions follow afterwards, and then you just acknowledge them one after the other. Okay, how you felt, what happened, how do you go about it, and I mean, I don't have a therapist or a sports psychologist with me, but I always have a very positive internal dialogue I have with myself, and more than it being just positive, it's very real, it's realistic. You got to look at yourself in the mirror, and a fact is a fact. I mean, so you got to take things at face value. And once you do that, you tend to, you know, accept what you can. If you can't change something, you can't change it. But there's ways around it. So that was cool.
So I think that wraps up our interview.
Awesome.
It was really, really nice talking to you.
Likewise.
And we wish you the best.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.